In a small town nestled near green hills and a quiet stream, there lived Amma, a name that, in many Indian languages, simply means mother. Her cottage stood at the edge of the village, wrapped by a garden of beans, okra, and marigolds, a few guava trees, and a bamboo fence that whispered whenever the wind turned. Amma's hair was silver like monsoon clouds, her hands mapped with lifelines of planting, cooking, and comforting. She woke before the sun, swept the courtyard with a broom of tied coconut fronds, and placed a pinch of rice on the windowsill for any ant that might pass. People said her laughter could settle an argument, and her silence could hold a secret like a clay pot holds water. Though her husband had walked ahead into the next world many seasons ago, she never spoke of loneliness. Instead, she greeted each dawn with the words, "Enough is a beautiful word," and believed it. Amma was not alone in the cottage. She shared her days with Poppy, a small white hen whose wings carried ink-black speckles and whose comb bobbed like a brave red flag. Poppy followed Amma everywhere, fluttering onto the low mud wall while Amma hung laundry, pecking at the soil whenever Amma turned the earth, and clucking in soft Morse code that Amma swore she could read. Each sunrise, as saffron light spilled across the tiles, Poppy slipped into the nesting box and, after a short soliloquy of clucks, presented a single warm egg, smooth as a river stone. Amma lifted it with both hands, felt its faint heat, and whispered, "One is enough, my dear. May we always have just what we need." She cracked half into an iron pan for breakfast, saved the rest for supper, and the cycle began again, an unspoken contract between woman and hen, sealed with quiet gratitude. This rhythm carried the seasons. Emma watered her garden with wastewater from washing lentils, tied tomato vines with strips of old sari, and traded a handful of coriander leaves for a pinch of salt. When children skipped past on their way to the government school, she pressed a guava into their pockets. When the tailor's wife lost her third pregnancy, Amma left pumpkin soup on the doorstep without knocking. She practiced Santasha, the old Sanskrit teaching that contentment is not the absence of desire but the gentle refusal to let desire rule you. On new moon nights, she lit a single clay lamp and recited, "What I kept never filled my heart, what I gave became my wealth." The villagers smiled at her simplicity, half puzzled, half envious of the peace that clung to her like the scent of cardamom. One April morning, when the mango buds were still tight as secrets, Poppy did something unusual. She entered the nesting box, fussed twice as long, and emerged triumphant. Amma reached beneath the straw and found not one but two perfect eggs. She blinked, weighed them in her palm as if they were gold coins, and laughed, a sound like coins dropped into a temple hundi. "Two," she said to Poppy, who looked immensely pleased with herself. "Well, now that's generous." Amma cooked one egg with cracked pepper and the last of yesterday's chapati, placed the other in a cloth, and walked to the weekly market. She did not haggle, she simply asked the rice merchant for a handful of unpolished grains and the jaggery stall for a thumb-sized lump. The trader teased, "Amma, if your hen keeps this up, you'll be a rich woman." She replied, "Rich enough is rich enough," and returned home before the sun climbed 2 fists higher. The next day brought the same miracle, 2 eggs, warm and smooth. And the next, and the next. Word spread faster than monsoon clouds. The tea stall owner advised Amma to sell both eggs and buy a second hen. The schoolteacher, notebook in hand, calculated monthly profits. Even the sarpanch, the village head, suggested a microloan to build a concrete coop. "Think bigger, Amma," they chorused. 10 hens, 20 eggs, a delivery bicycle, branded crates, imagine. Amma listened, head tilted like Poppy studying a grasshopper. Enterprise, she knew, could lift families. She had seen the milkman's son buy textbooks from the extra pail of milk, watched the potter's daughter pay college fees with festival dias. Yet she also knew the scent of greed, how it crept in like damp and left mold on the walls. So she smiled, wrapped an egg in a torn newspaper, and handed it to the widow raising 3 grandsons. "One for me and one to share," she repeated. "That's enough." Children began calling her Egg Amma, a nickname that fluttered through the lanes like a bright kite. June arrived on the back of bruised clouds. The southwest monsoon, which scientists track from Kerala northward, reached their hillside earlier and angrier than usual. For 3 days the sky cracked open, the stream swelled into a bronze dragon, fields turned to mirrors, and thatched roofs sagged like tired eyelids. Stored grain fermented, shop shutters stayed closed, and the daily wage laborers watched their earnings wash away. Still, each dawn, Poppy shook off raindrops, marched into her box, and produced 2 eggs. Amma collected them in a brass bowl, boiled batches on a kerosene stove, pickled some in lime and salt, and tucked others into cane baskets lined with turmeric leaves. Between downpours, she trudged through ankle-deep mud to homes where babies wailed with empty stomachs, leaving eggs like quiet blessings. No ledger, no names. One slate gray afternoon, a cluster of drenched neighbors arrived at her door. The schoolteacher clutching ruined books, the milkman with empty cans, the seamstress whose sewing machine had rusted. They stood under Amma's dripping eaves, shame and hunger wrestling on their faces. The teacher spoke first. "Amma, we mocked your simplicity. Had you built that business, you could have fed us all now." Rain drummed on the tin roof like 1,000 impatient fingers. Amma invited them inside, ladled hot ginger tea into steel glasses, and passed around a plate of pickled eggs. When silence settled, she said, "True happiness is not a race to gather more. It is loving what we already have and sharing it when the time comes. I kept only what I needed. The rest was a gift waiting for open hands." Yes, enterprise can be noble. Build your dairies, your boutiques, your apps, but let the roots be fairness, the trunk community, the branches peace. My path was to stay small and share. Perhaps tomorrow the river will ask you to build bigger boats, then build, but keep the same heart. Poppy clucked softly from beneath the cot, as if seconding the motion. The storm eased by nightfall, leaving behind a sky rinsed clean and stars that looked freshly polished. Amma's visitors returned to their homes carrying leftover eggs and a new quiet inside their chests. Over the next weeks, her cottage became a humble hub of recovery. She taught the widowed daughter-in-law how to pickle safely, sterilize the jar, layer salt, turn it daily so the gift would last. She gave the schoolteacher eggs to barter for notebooks in the next town. She convinced the tailor to repair soaked clothes in exchange for protein-rich meals. Word spread that Egg Amma's veranda opened at dawn, no sermons, just sustenance and a listening ear. Scientists who study disaster resilience note that communities with strong informal sharing networks recover faster. Amma had never read the papers, yet she lived the data. When surplus flows like groundwater, the whole village drinks. Each egg carried more than amino acids. It carried the message: you are seen, you matter, we are still us. Children who ate them drew smiling hens in their exercise books and stopped complaining about portion size. Elders who swallowed the soft yolks remembered stories of earlier famines broken by neighborly kindness. A subtle shift occurred. People began leaving extras on one another's doorsteps. An eggplant, a bowl of milk, a bundle of firewood, signed only with a tiny chalk hen. August arrived with humid breath. Fields were replanted, roofs rethatched, and the stream retreated to its courteous banks. The government distributed sacks of fortified wheat. NGOs set up medical camps. Yet villagers still climbed the gentle hill to Amma's cottage, not because they lacked food, but because they craved the atmosphere of enough. On market day, the rice merchant tried to press an extra kilo into her hands. "You paid me many times over with your eggs," he insisted. She accepted half, reminding him, balance keeps the scale honest. The tailor stitched her a new cotton sari from leftover bolt ends. She wore it to the temple and donated her old one to the rag picker's wife. Nothing was wasted, everything circulated, like water, like breath. One evening, Poppy did not emerge from the nesting box at the usual hour. Amma found her brooding, feathers fluffed, eyes half closed. The double-egg miracle had quietly ended. Nature had returned to its steady cadence. Amma stroked the bird's warm back and whispered, "Thank you for the abundance, and for teaching me when to stop." She carried the single egg inside, cooked it with cumin and rice, and shared half with the stray tabby that had adopted her porch. The next morning, she planted marigold seeds in the shape of a small heart beside the coop. "Growth takes many forms," she mused. "Sometimes flowers, sometimes forgiveness, sometimes the courage to decline more." Seasons turned. The schoolteacher used restored textbooks to explain the water cycle. Students now drew arrows from stream to cloud to rain to field, understanding interdependence as more metaphor than diagram. The milkman added a second buffalo but allocated every 10th liter to the orphanage. The seamstress bought a rust-proof sewing machine and started a cooperative. One day a week they stitched school uniforms for free. None called it charity, they called it passing the egg forward. Economists might label it localized circular economy. The villagers simply called it being human. Researchers continue to find that pro-social spending activates reward centers in the brain, releasing oxytocin and elevating mood. Alma's neighbors felt it as a lightness in the chest when they placed tomatoes in an empty tiffin, a buoyancy that lingered longer than personal purchases ever had. Yet this study of happiness also confirms what Indian sages recorded millennia ago. Lasting contentment arises when basic needs are met, relationships are strong, and one's actions align with inner values. Amma possessed all three, not by chasing them but by tending them like her garden, daily, modestly, faithfully. Years later, when outsiders visited to document flood recovery, they were shown concrete embankments, elevated hand pumps, and early warning apps. But villagers also brought them to a small cottage where an old woman and a speckled hen sat under a guava tree. This, they said, is where we learned that resilience begins with sharing. Amma greeted visitors with the same line she offered travelers decades earlier. Come, have a cup of tea. You are exactly on time. If asked for her secret, she would laugh, eyes disappearing into happy crescents. I just practiced two things. Keep only what you need, and remember the bowl is fullest when it overflows into another. Poppy eventually passed, buried beneath the marigold heart now blooming perennially. Amma missed her friend, yet felt the hen spirit in every unexpected gift, a double mango, a double rainbow, the doubled laughter of grandchildren playing nearby. She acquired a new young hen, ordinary in every way, laying the regulation single egg. Amma continued her ritual, half for breakfast, half for supper, gratitude for the circle complete. Tourists sometimes photographed the cottage, captioning it minimalist goals on social media, unaware that minimalism was never the aim, right-sizing was. The aim was to leave space for others to enter your story. Modern life trains us to measure wealth and compound interest, follower counts, square footage. Amma's ledger used different units: number of sleepless neighbors comforted, number of children who learned that sharing is not a sacrifice but a multiplier, number of days she fell asleep with no weight pressing on her ribcage. By that accounting, she died a millionaire, albeit one whose assets were stored in hearts rather than vaults. When her time arrived, quietly, at dawn, a faint smile suggesting she heard familiar clucking, villagers walked her wooden cot to the riverside ghat. Along the route, every household had placed an egg in a clay cup, a spontaneous garland of ovals glowing pink and white in the early light. No one had coordinated the act, it simply happened like dew. At the memorial, the schoolteacher recited a line from the Upanishads, Tena Tyaktina Banjitha, enjoy by renouncing. And when the crowd dispersed, each person carried home an empty clay cup, space for the next gift they might give. So if you find yourself counting likes, deals, or square meters and still feel the ache of scarcity, remember the woman who measured wealth in eggs and empathy. True happiness is not the adrenaline surge of acquisition, it is the quiet certainty that you have enough, and the thrilling realization that you can share. Contentment without generosity grows brittle. Generosity without contentment breeds burnout. Together, they form an endless loop. Gratitude reveals surplus, surplus enables giving, giving deepens gratitude. Around it spins like a village potter's wheel, shaping sturdy vessels we call community, resilience, peace. Practice it today. Identify one thing you possess in excess: time, attention, homemade muffins, an unused coat, and convert it into someone else's relief. Do so without expectation of return, and notice the strange warmth that lingers in your chest, warmer than any purchase receipt. Then tomorrow, repeat with something else. The size of the gift matters less than the consistency of the habit. Poppy's 2 eggs were small, yet they floated an entire village through a flood. Your act may seem microscopic against global problems, but it is colossal within the hidden ecology of human trust. And should unexpected abundance ever land in your lap, a bonus, a windfall, a literal double yoke, pause before scaling up private consumption. Ask instead, who is hungry? Who is cold? Who feels invisible? Let your answer guide the surplus, and you will discover what Amma knew all along. The shortest path to joy is the one that detours through another's well-being. Keep what you need. Share what you can. Let peace be the measure of your wealth, and you will never feel poor again.